Welcome back, everybody. So we're on to the last presentation of the afternoon. I'm absolute pleasure in welcoming Joanne Lockwood to the stage. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Kerry. How are you doing? Good to be here.
I'm really well. I'm really well. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Fantastic. Yes, looking forward to this.
Yes.
Then it's the weekend, so I'm sitting between the weekend and everybody else. So yeah,
Well,
I'm
that's all right. We're
good to go.
happy to absolutely wait until the weekends to hear what you've got to say. So I'll let you carry on, introduce yourself, and we'll be here if you need anything.
Okay, fantastic. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Um, Fantastic warm welcome there from Kerry. My name is Joanne Lockwood, and I use the pronouns she and her. I describe myself as an inclusion and belonging specialist. So I work with organisations throughout the UK, Europe, and elsewhere to focus on positive people experiences, to create cultures where people can thrive in the world of work and also in society. So talent acquisition, OD, etc. I've spent the last couple of hours listening in. I've been in hop in with you, listening to the previous presenters, and I've been inspired so far. So what I'm going to hopefully do now is pull together some of the stuff we've been talking about already and try and bring a summary to the end of the day for you. So let's start by just refreshing ourselves on the freedom principles. I'm sure we're all aware of these. Whenever I think about inclusion, belonging, and engaging in the D&I sort of sphere, I always hold these principles in my mind. So the fairness, respect, equality or equity, of course, dignity and autonomy, agency, giving people that real freedom of choice and empowerment. So I always have this in my head when I'm making decisions, when I'm thinking about how I'm acting. We all make judgments, but are we being fair and respectful? And when we heard the previous presentations about allyship and bystander effect and the anti-racism talks earlier, are we being fair when we're judging and including our people? So I like to challenge organizations and also individuals about finding our own why of D&I, so diversity and inclusion. Why does it matter for you as an individual or for your organization to be inclusive, to be diverse? If we're not understanding our own why, then we're doing it for other people's reasons. I know my why. I know how I want to feel. I know how I want to be included. And therefore, I want to give that feeling to others as well. Because when people thrive, perform at their best, the organization works well. We'll talk a bit about that in a minute. So there are two sides to the why: the human factor, doing the right thing, the legislative, the hygiene, the I want to be treated right, we should all be treated right. But in order to make it sustainable, there also has to be this business case. I know we hate talking about business case when we're thinking about people, but we can look at the business case very simply. The return on inclusion, the ROI, retention, productivity, better experiences for service users. We know the stats, we know what it means. So that by looking at both of those sides hand in hand, then we deliver great outcomes that are sustainable. Let's remind ourselves of Hertzberg's motivational theory. Yeah. The theory being that there are hygiene factors. And this is what I think about, the Equality Act, the anti-racism training, the unconscious bias training, all the things we're trying to do to make sure that our people do not feel that they are coming to a place of work that is unsafe. That bring your whole self to work. These are the hygiene factors. Them, in their own right, do not become motivational, but they can cause lack of motivation if they're not present. So we are seeing racism, we are seeing homophobia. That damages people's ability to thrive in the environment. So what we're looking for there is to make sure we get the hygiene factors right first. Then we can look at factors to motivate and encourage our employees to work harder, discretionary effort, whatever, however we want to describe that. So we've got to get the basics right. And we've talked about the basics quite a lot this afternoon. Let's try and think about some of those motivators and how we can make sure that people feel that sense of belonging to the environment. So let's think about perspective. Whenever I think about allyship, whenever I think about getting involved in conversations, perspective is everything. Where I stand, where you stand, even 3 feet apart, we can see the same thing but perceive it differently. So clearly in this example, One person on the left thinks it's black, one person on the right thinks the sphere is white. But where we sit, we can sit back and we can tell that the sphere is both black and white. So there's more than one truth, there's more than one perspective. There's what I believe, my opinions, my view of the world, and there's other people's view of the world. So we can clearly understand why diversity works, why more opinions into the conversation mean we get a better truth, a bigger perspective on the challenge we're facing. So if we think about this equation here, E plus R equals O. So E is an event. That could be a decision, it could be a challenge, it could be in the recruitment process, it could be a patient engagement, whatever it may be, we have an event occur. Of course, we react. We look at that event, we react. And from that reaction gives us an outcome. But we recognize that the plus in this equation is our perspective. How I perceive the event leads me to react in a way that leads to an outcome. So two people with different perspectives, maybe that's lived experience, maybe that's faith, ethnicity, LGBTQ status, whatever their perspective is on life, they may perceive that event differently, therefore react, leading to a different outcome. So what I invite people to think about is how can you hold strong opinions, but hold them weakly held opinions. So you're not gripping on and being a prisoner to your beliefs. You're willing to engage in creative doubt. The danger with holding on tightly is we use our confirmation bias. We never seek alternative views. So can we engage in this creative doubt? We look for information that doesn't fit. Challenge ourselves. Start to ask our own why questions. Why do I think this? Why do I believe that? We know we've got biases. We know we've got blind spots. But how often do we step back, slow our thinking down and challenge? Why do I think something? And that's the way we can start to mitigate, challenge. And not only do we ask ourselves those why questions, we feel comfortable and confident talking to our colleagues about why they think something. And we're open to being challenged back. Why do you think something? So I cast my mind back to school. I mean, I'm in my, well, I used to say mid-50s. I'm probably nearer my late 50s now. So it's quite a while ago for me, in my GCE O levels back in the day. And my maths teacher always said, show your workings out. It's not just about your final answer. So I think about this in our perspectives. We may disagree. We may have opinions that differ because we perceive the challenge or the event in a different way. But if we can engage in creative doubt, if we can engage in asking why we think something, we show our workings out. And I can have a far more productive conversation about why I think something rather than about what I think. And then when we're trying to think about allyship, we're trying to think about how we create psychological safety. We're not having a clash of opinions, but understanding the perspective of why someone thinks something. And I'm not for one moment suggesting we should go down rabbit holes, that we should engage in conspiracy theories or wild theories, but at least understanding why someone thinks something is half the battle to thinking about how we can include that person in our thought process. So let's think about the impact of language. I know we've talked about some of this already this afternoon. It has been raised. But let's just think about one of the biggest barriers that I hear and see to when we talk about inclusion is this fear of saying or doing the wrong thing. I've never met someone like you before. I've never met someone who's a wheelchair user. I've never had a conversation with someone who's black before. I'm scared. I haven't got the tools. I haven't got the experience to have a conversation. And we may think, as you know, as people in our profession, that having conversation with people is straightforward. But we know that not everybody is comfortable and competent in culturally diverse situations. So this is where we have to think about our EQ and CQ, emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence. So I'm sure we're all aware that EQ is our ability to manage our own emotions. And I think that's really, really important that we bring ourselves present into conversations. If we're bringing our stress, we're bringing baggage, we're bringing our thoughts, and we're not present and in control of our emotions, how can we listen? How can we engage with people? How can we truly understand their needs? So we know that people with high EQ are great at building stronger relationships. But we also have to recognize that people who are neurodivergent do not use EQ in the same way that neurotypical people do. So we've got to think about where we have high levels of EQ, We have to help others that maybe aren't on the same plane as we are. And then cultural intelligence is being competent and comfortable in diverse situations. When I think about culture, I think about beyond faith, ethnicity. I think about the culture of queer, the culture of feminism, the culture of disability, the culture of people who are deaf, born deaf, big D, acquired a hearing impairment with a small d, cochlear implant users versus signers versus lip readers. All different culture, and understanding the nuances helps us better understand how we can deliver and tailor services and make people feel included. So we talked about this already, but I just give you my spin on this intent. I believe we all start off the day with great intent. We want to do a fantastic job. We want to be positive. But inadvertently, our great intent can have negative impact. It's problematic. Maybe the language we use, a procedure we follow, disadvantages someone or causes a problem. Now, that's the point where we need to be accountable. I'm sorry. Own it. Own it. Not push it back. It was a mistake. It's about owning that accountability for the negative impact or the problematic situation that arose. So if we decide not to change, that's a choice. We've chosen that we've understood something is problematic. We understood something causes someone some distress. If we do not choose to change our behavior, we've chosen to continue on to propagate that challenge. I always say people should have a plan B. We don't all get it right every time. I get things wrong. I'm sure others do as well. So it's knowing what the plan B is. Yes, apologize. Yes, it was a mistake. But how do we then recover that? What can I do? We can think about listening, engaging, go back to freedom principles, that agency and autonomy, giving the person we're trying to engage with the empowerment to tell us how we can make the problem right. Not burdening them with making them fix the problem, but sharing that resolution with them so that we understand what we're trying to achieve and getting a shared resolution. So language matters. How you describe me, how you talk about me, how I describe myself impacts the way I feel, the way I'm motivated. So when we talk about things like diverse, when we think about diverse, often it conjures up in our heads different, not the same as me. I'm straight, white, etc., etc. If we talk about diverse, I'm immediately thinking about other. I want to think about this, but let's also challenge how we see people. Let's be really honest. People are underrepresented. People come from oppressed communities. People come from minority backgrounds. People do not have a voice. That's what we're trying to achieve here. When we think about diversity, we think about inclusion. We're trying to empower and give people a voice who are not heard, who are not represented from different communities. How do we allow people from oppressed communities to thrive and succeed in our place of work? We often default the privilege. We have football. We have lots of football. And then we have women's football. Do we really have men's football or we just have football? So we're defaulting the terms. We think about trans and cis. We talk about trans people. We don't talk about cis people because cis people are the default. And that often occurs when we think about race or sexuality. We look at Valentine's Day cards, we look at Father's Day cards, Mother's Day cards, or just parent cards. We're defaulting the language to the privilege. We're defaulting how we see people based on our own lens and our own set of privileges. So we've got to think about the language we use and the way we see the world and the assumptions we make based on our own set of rules. Of course, language evolves. What was great language? Acceptable. Maybe it wasn't great. Acceptable language in the 70s, some of the sitcoms, some of the bad stuff that we heard. It was kind of acceptable at the time. But we now know that that language is racist, is homophobic, is sexist. So we know that language evolves and we've got to keep being aware of the contemporary language of the day. So let's start moving into inclusive thinking. So we talked about some of the basics. We talked about how we can focus on language. Let's start to pull that together. So let's talk about this continuum of inclusion. And right at the outset, on the far outskirts is exclusion. You treat people differently. You treat them as outsiders. You treat them as others. They have little value, little worth. The blue box at the top here. And then we move through that into tolerate. Tolerance, tolerate. To me, tolerance is a horrible word. It means to me, you're going to barely put up with me. I don't want to work with you. I don't want to be with you. I will put up with you because I have to, because it's work, it's the rules. You're in my team, or you're my patient, whatever it may be. I'm going to tolerate you. I speak to many people, myself included. I would rather be excluded than suffer the 1,000 cuts of tolerance. So think about how we treat people when we tolerate. We put up with their ideas, but we don't value them. We're not really welcoming them into our environment. How we want to make people feel, we want to make people feel accepted. Recognize that people have skills and value and insight that we can use as part of our team. But where I think the magic happens for me when I'm embraced, when I'm celebrated. When people say, I don't see color, I don't see race, I don't see gender, you're effectively erasing everything that matters to me. I want you to embrace me for who I am, celebrate who I am, recognize my transiness, and use that to an advantage so I can thrive in the environment. So let's think about how we position people in our organizations. Are we pushing them into the yellow through acceptance, into them being embraced? If we're not, why aren't we doing that? Maybe we can think about times when we've tolerated or excluded people. How does that make them feel? So who is the leader? Who is a leader? We think about leaders being in hierarchy, but leadership is a process of social influence. It's how I can make change, maximize the efforts of others towards a goal. I think and I believe we are all leaders. We are all leaders. We lead ourselves. We may not always lead other people in a structural way, but we're there to influence. We have opinions. We can say, we can give our thoughts. So leadership applies to all, not just a structural leader. But then the inclusive leader is someone who recognizes their own strengths, their own work style, their own communications, how they motivate. But they also recognize that they need to be person-centric. They need to think about the needs of their team, their colleagues. Then they flex. They look at each individual person and meet their needs in motivation and communication and how they talk and treat them. That way, the inclusive leader gets the best out of individuals and brings them together as a team. So it's about positive people experiences, as I said earlier. For organizations to grow and thrive, the world of work has to be better for people. It's kind of a culture first. We've got to fix our culture. We often say we should not put fish into a dirty tank. The same applies to people. If our culture is toxic, if people aren't thriving, then hiring new people, hiring new fish, putting them in our dirty tank, we're just going to end up with fin rot. So we've got to fix the culture. Culture first has to be the mission, recognizing how we celebrate and motivate our people beyond hygiene into motivation. So inclusion for me is all about how you make me feel by how you treat me. How do you make me feel? And we can bundle into that how you communicate with me, how you motivate me, how you value me, the work you give me, etc., how you describe me. All of that is how you make me feel and how you treat me. So if you want me to feel motivated and passionate and aligned, then you know that that's how you have to focus on treating me. So we have this need for belonging. And I love this quote by Oprah Winfrey. And she says, I see you, I hear you, and what you say matters to me. Because if you truly listen to somebody, you truly hear somebody, you're present in that moment. You've got your EQ, you've got your stress, you've left all that behind and you're present. When you truly hear someone, they feel belonging. And I know in the NHS you have a you said we did. Because one of the biggest causes of frustration and lack of belongingness is when you ask people, you hear people, but you do nothing with the action. People don't get tired of surveys. They get tired of no action from surveys. They get tired of no action from being asked. The quickest way to demotivate someone is ask their opinion and then ignore them. So we need to truly hear. We need to truly understand and listen and action. Right, yeah. If you're a fan of Maslow, right in the middle of Maslow here is the belongingness, that need we have. This is where the magic starts to happen, so we can build our self-esteem and eventually self-actualize it. That's where the discretionary effort kicks in and we become really motivated. But if we don't feel belonging, we start to worry, we start to be less productive. We're more worried about our psychological and safety needs. Go back to the the hygiene level of motivation. If we're still worried about whether we're going to be suffering microaggressions, bullying, harassment, not truly being embraced, then we're going to be going down the ladder. And we'll just be worried about collecting our money, doing our job and going home. Where we want to do is move people through belonging, building self-esteem and self-actualizing people to create that discretionary effort, to create that alignment, to create that passion and purpose. So how do we know if our people are feeling belonging? Yes, we've got employee engagement. Yes, we've got focus groups and listening. But do we ask the right questions? So let's explore a few questions. I think 8 questions here that we can use as a judge to understand whether we truly are creating this environment for our people. So would you say this about your organization? I am really enthusiastic about the mission of my company. Do you understand the mission? Do you understand what you're trying to achieve? I'd like to think so as an NHS trust, that you kind of understand the mission. But do you really communicate it? Or are you just coming in, saving lives, going home? What's the real outcome to improve health for the population and society? What is your mission? Do you understand it? Am I here for the right reasons? Work, I clearly understand what's expected of me. Are you working in an environment where you're well led, you're briefed, you feel this structure, you feel you understand what you can do to succeed? Or are you left guessing? In my team, I'm surrounded by people who share my values. Psychological safety, very important. I can bring my whole self to work. I can have differences, but we have core alignment on values. That's how I'm going to feel part of an organization. I have the chance to use my strengths at work every day. I'm stretched. I'm given the opportunity to do what I'm good at. You give me things that I'm bad at or I don't like doing, how motivated I'm going to be. The magic happens again when I'm doing things that I really am engaged with and passionate about. My teammates have my back. I know that I'm not working alone. I know that I feel part of an organization where everybody's working together and rooting for everybody to succeed. I know I'll be recognized for excellent work. I know that someone is caring about me. They're spotting what I'm doing. They're making sure that I'm delivering. And then when I do good, when I'm being the best person I can be, it is recognized. I'm not just beavering away in the background and nobody cares. I know that people care about the quality of the work I deliver. Therefore, I'm going to strive for excellence. I have confidence in my company's future. Okay, we'd like to think the NHS is going to be around for a long time. So are we creating this forward planning? Do people know what's on the horizon, what the developments are? Are there going to be reorgs? Is there change fatigue going on? All this can have a serious influence on someone's ability to thrive if they're unsure about their environment and the future of it. In my work, I'm always challenged to grow, continual learning, opportunity for advancement, opportunity for knowledge, opportunity to maybe cross train in different roles to keep us fit. If we're doing the same role for year and year, maybe 10 years, maybe we do get tired. Maybe we need that opportunity to try something different or stretch ourselves in different directions. So these are kind of key questions around engagement. Think about how you are tackling each of these 8 items and think about the answer you give. Because if we're getting people here with scores out of 5 in the 4s and 5s for all these answers, great. Are we looking at when people they're dropping down to 1s and 2s? How do we recognize that when people aren't engaged in our organizations? How do we re-engage? So let's think about just picking out the even numbers here, the best of me factors. These are things that affect me. Yeah, I understand what's expected of me. I understand how I can use my strengths. I can recognize. I know I'm going to be recognized for excellent work, and I'm challenged to grow. These are things that are really for my benefit. And then the best of we factors. This is more about the organization. I'm enthusiastic about the company. I'm in a team. I've got teammates and I've got confidence. So we've got the best of me and we've got the best of we. But then the killer question is, do I have the chance to use my strengths? Because if I'm challenged, if I know that I'm delivering what makes me happy, what makes me motivated, I'm going to continue to thrive and feel that belonging in the organization. If you give me tasks that don't play to my strengths, then I'm not going to be motivated. And my scores will go, they'll drop, and I'll leave, I'll move on. So inclusion starts with I. We may not be able to change the world on our own, but we can change ourselves. We can take responsibility personally and be the one. We think about a snowflake. A snowflake with friends is an avalanche. An avalanche can change landscapes. That's where we want to be. Thank you very much. I'd love to take some questions and get interactive with you now. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Really loved that presentation. Thank you so much. So just thinking about questions then, Simon or Jasmine, would you like to, could you post any thoughts that's gone on in the chat, or any questions that might have gone on in the chat for us, so that we can take those in the last couple of minutes? Thanks, Joanne. There's so much there to kind of to digest and think about, and you know, the day has been such a, you know, such an amazing different set of speakers and such an amazing different sets of thoughts and insights. It's just all kind of resonating and kind of, you know,
I was
there
really interested in
they
the previous speakers around the bystander effect and that ability for us each to have the power to step in, step out, and be that ally and be proactive, because there's nothing worse than passive allies. Allies, fair weather allies. It's about knowing when it's safe. How, and I love the ideas about how we distract, how we intervene in different ways, because we've got to put our own oxygen mask on. We can't put ourselves in danger, and I think that's really, really important when we talk about allyship. And I
really
just
practical, weren't they? Really good.
that's good. Yeah.
Okay, so some thoughts. So Jan, loved your bit about creative doubt. Need to be challenged on our strong opinions. Just a bit about what you were saying, really, I suppose, and how do we do that safely and with respect, and but continue to do it. And then we've got another one from David. Interesting to think about how our default is rooted in privilege and respect in professional groups. Do you find, have you found, you know, the different, working with different professions, you know, you've got a different level of understanding and insight there?
Yeah, I think it was touched on earlier by one of your previous speakers around the concept of privilege. You know, it's if you don't think about it, it's obviously a privilege. And I think about the opposite of a lack of privilege. I call it pebbles in your rucksack. It's that additional burden you have to carry every day just to be you. And there's this big misunderstanding around privilege where it's always seen as being, I haven't had it easy. You know, I came from a working class family. I didn't have this when I was young. But people often don't realize it's not about what you have had to go through. It's about what you haven't had to go through. You haven't been denied something because of the color of your skin, because of your sexuality, because you're a wheelchair user. And I often think, you know, I'm an able-bodied person, and it always reminds me when I travel the tube with my friend who has cerebral palsy as a wheelchair user. Just the extra thought process she has to go through to get on a bus, the extra thought process she has to do to navigate accessible tube stations, the people she has to ask to help her to enable her to succeed. And I've never thought about that. I've got another friend who has an assistance dog. They can't use escalators. So again, when she's trying to navigate London, she's trying to navigate, and it brought it home to me that I haven't had to think about the privilege of having legs and ears and eyes until you're with someone that doesn't have that. And that really brought it home to me about what privilege means. It's what I haven't had to think about.
The walking in people's shoes bit is the most, from my own experience, is the most powerful way of really understanding and learning. So yeah, that's a really good example. We've got a question here talking about language. Could you expand on the importance of pronouns?
Yeah, it's a common question. I mean, I don't know if you're aware, this is Trans Awareness Week, 13th to 20th of November, and tomorrow is Trans Day of Remembrance to commemorate any trans person that's died in the last year or in the last 100 years. So pronouns, yes. For those unaware, she, her, female pronouns, he, him, male pronouns, they, them, often used as gender neutral or non-binary pronouns. There are other neo pronouns. Why are they important? Well, for me, they signify part of my identity. But why is it important to share them? Why is it important to put them on emails, on the StreamYard title at the bottom of the screen here? Why is that important? For me, it's like a rainbow flag in a cafe. It sums up to me that if I go into this cafe with a rainbow flag on the door, I know it's safe for me. I know the people in that cafe will be welcoming. They'll be great allies. They'll step in if things go wrong, and they'll make sure that I feel safe. So I see pronouns sharing as a very similar signposting. It says, I understand why it's important for trans, non-binary, and all people to normalize the sharing of pronouns. It says, I've understood what it means to others. So I say sharing pronouns is not about me. It's actually less about telling about me. It's more about telling you that I know and can respect you. I also say, if you don't get it, don't do it. I would never say
Mm.
to anybody you should share your pronouns. What I always say is share them when you're ready. Share them when you understand what it means to others. If you think it's all woke and PC, then fine. Please don't, because then I know that you may be not as safe space as I thought you were. So yeah, I would encourage people to understand why it's important and then make their own decisions about whether they want to or not, because I wouldn't want anybody to do it. But the other effect is that not everybody has a name that is obviously a gender. Maybe you come from outside of the UK, or your family name, or your full name. Even if you have an Irish name, I know some very beautiful Irish names. You cannot always tell someone's gender from the name. You have to start making assumptions. So by sharing pronouns, it helps also for people who have a gender. What's the word I'm looking for? A gender indescript name. Maybe someone from with a foreign
Mm.
language. And also, I've seen people in French and German share their French and German pronouns, which says to me, this is not an English first language speaker. So there are lots of ways that pronouns can be useful beyond queer and LGBT. And I think just sharing them, it's a great signpost.
Great, thank you. Just one more then. We've got David says, it looks like tolerance is a necessary but unfortunate step on the way to greater acceptance. Any thoughts of how we can speed through?
Thoughts on speeding up acceptance. It's like, I think, as I said at the end of the presentation, it's about being the one. It's about taking personal responsibility, knowing what you can do as an ally, knowing what you can do to step up, step in, be active, call out discrimination, microaggressions, whatever it may be. Because what I don't want anyone to do is kind of feel it's too daunting. I can't change the world. But just change yourself. Be that person that spreads out that message as a beacon from within you, and pass that light on to others. So I think that's what we can do. And I've got a lot of heart in the younger generation. I feel that there's a lot of hope there around the evolution of being open and being inclusive. The way children have been brought up these days, I think the educational system is very focused on inclusion, and people are being educated very well. Children are commonly sharing their pronouns, their gender identities. It's no longer a taboo subject. It's no longer confusing. And in fact, I've heard many adults, many parents saying that their children are educating them on diversity and inclusion.
Nice.
So, and when I run training courses, I've actually had people on the training course say their motivation for being there is so they can have better conversation with their children. So we cannot necessarily change yesterday. We're going to struggle to change today and maybe tomorrow, but next week, the week after, the year after that, I can see that change is happening. It may be slow. It may not be quick enough for everybody, but I think the trajectory is positive.
Thank you so much. I mean, finding your own why was really powerful for me, and we've been discussing that in our own organisation at UHS in terms of what do we mean, what do we want to achieve. So that really resonated with me. Thank you. So I think that's come to the end of our time with you. Thank you so much for giving your time, preparing your presentation, and coming to talk to us. We really loved it. Thank you so much.